This is Money Moves on VSiN, the sports betting network.
Second hour of the program. We got a good hour at that. Coming up in a little bit, we're going to have a conversation, as we usually do, this weekend as we look ahead to what will be with our guy, Tom Byrne. Bruce Marshall is going to join us as well, college football. So everything will be on tap over the next couple of minutes. Get some good bettors in here to discuss the weekend coming up. But let's start with some Friday night lights. We do have some really good contests coming up in college football and some line moves that we have to discuss as well. So let's get to them and start in the ACC, where Miami is taking on Louisville, and a good game with a lot of weight to it. Because as Will Hill mentioned when he was with us earlier, this is kind of, I say kind of because you never can really trust Mario Cristobal, but this is kind of the last regular season speed bump, if you will, for Miami. If they could pull this off, the waters part, and this thing looks wide open for an undefeated regular season for the Hurricanes, should they be able to get this done. And at that, they're an 11.5-point favorite with a total of 49.5. But that 11.5 is indeed the subject of the conversation, because this was 13.5 this morning and for quite a few hours. So the last couple of hours, we've seen some Louisville support come in here. 4-point move, and now actually a 5-point move on the total as well. We're down to 49.5. Some spots open at 53.5, and I do think that makes some sense. Both teams coming off of their bye week. There is some weather, not much. I mean, there's some winds of about like 14 miles an hour, not enough to alter whether or not this thing is going to be played, on the ground, through the air, worth betting an under on. I think really this starts with a couple of points. The first of which is, how legitimate is Louisville's defense up to this point of the season? They're 11th in EPA per play allowed, 6th in defensive success rate, well above the 70th percentile in explosive play rate allowed, the Cardinals are. However, you look at their opponents. You have Eastern Kentucky, you have James Madison, Bowling Green, Pittsburgh, Virginia. Not exactly a murderer's row of efficient offenses. Now, Virginia is a very good offense, and you look at what they did to them, you would say that feather in the cap of this team being legitimate. 237 total yards, 4.8 yards through the air, and 2.8 yards on the ground per attempt for the Cavaliers against Louisville. So a point to the Cardinals in that this defense is legitimately good. And their strength has been against opposing passing attacks. You look across the board for this team in terms of against the pass defensively. Number 1 in EPA per play allowed per dropback for the Louisville Cardinals. Number 2 in per game. 12th in success rate. It's been a group that's been really good against the pass. This is going to be the best passing attack that they have faced by far. Miami, I think, efficient enough to get that done. But efficient, I think, is the key for Miami. They're efficient, not explosive. Non-explosive, expected points added, about the 100th percentile, nearly, for the Miami Hurricanes. They've been great in non-explosive plays, but explosive play rate just about under the 25th percentile for the Hurricanes. Haven't been able to generate explosives. Would help you out here from the point of getting this game to go under the total as well, if you're not going to generate some big plays of 15 or more yards to the air, 20 or more yards on the ground. I think the other portion of this question becomes, though, can Miami lean on this run defense for the Louisville Cardinals? That becomes, I think, one of the big points of whether or not this game goes in one direction. Cardinals' run defense has kind of been its weakness to this point, but it's still been above average. 37th in expected points added per play, rushing allowed, 65th percentile or so in terms of explosive run plays allowed, and Miami's been pretty average for a championship contender, at least when you look at some of their metrics in terms of their ground game. No higher in some of the key metrics than 31st with their rushing offense, in that category being success rate on the ground. Then it comes back to what Louisville wants to do, and I think this ultimately makes the difference for me. Louisville's offense has been all right, but not really great, not really dynamic. And this is a defense that is going to very much test them, especially from an edge rushing standpoint. We know how good that this pass rush can be for Miami, and that might make a difference here. You look at just the general offensive fingerprint for the Louisville Cardinals coming into this game. Their best offensive category is success rate, 56th in the country. So they don't really stay on track too much. They don't really generate explosives. And Miller Moss has not played particularly well. Since week 1, we'll draw a line through the game against Eastern Kentucky. You're talking about a PFF grade of 60.4, a turnover-worthy play rate of 5.6%. He's thrown only 2 interceptions, but if you have a high turnover-worthy play rate like that, coupled with a low interception total, that would mean you're getting pretty lucky. And at some point, you're probably going to get burned. And I would assume that against this team, that would be the case. So lean a little bit toward the under, but interested here in that the Louisville Cardinals are getting some support down to 11.5 with that total of 49.5. And we should know, too, I mean, look at the ATS records here. That is an indicator of how you deal with market expectations. And Miami has exceeded market expectations. Louisville has not been a team that has handled these expectations by the betting market very well. 1-4 against the spread. And here is that same betting market obviously, betting them down and raising those expectations once more. Let's go to the Big Ten. Nebraska on the road against Minnesota. Interesting line move here. We saw Circa open up at 5.5. This is all the way up. Circa reached 9 at one point, got bought back down 8. Now we're here at 7. Total sitting at 47.5. No real move from where we have sat in terms of where this opened. 2 over teams for the most part this season. 5-1 to the over for Nebraska, 4-2 to the over for Minnesota. I think what's going to be interesting here, first off, narratively, if you're not in tune with what the series has been, Nebraska's lost 5 straight in the series against Minnesota, 6 of 7, 2 injuries to watch for. If you were checking out availability reports today, Aiden Gooseby for the Golden Gophers, as well as their cornerback, Mike Gerald. Gooseby, of course, being a safety. Both missed the game last week against Purdue. Haven't been able to see whether or not those two are going to be available, but keep that in mind. And I always find these games kind of interesting, not only because it is a conference game, but you get a big matchup of weakness on weakness between the two. If you look at Nebraska's offense, 63rd expected points added per rush attempt, 47th in rushing success rate, about the 30th percentile in explosive play rate generated on the ground. But on the flip side, for Minnesota's defense, 76th in expected points added per rush by opponents, 72nd in defensive rushing success rate, and about the 90th percentile in rushing explosive rate. So they actually don't give up a ton of big runs of 10 or more yards, but on a down-to-down basis, when you're running against this front, you could do it, and you could do it relatively well. Then on the flip side, Minnesota's offense, one of the worst rushing offenses you're going to see in the country. We're talking about 125th, 101st, and a 10th percentile in expected points added per rush, rushing success rate, and rushing explosive layered out. And for Nebraska, they're across the board in the triple digits as well in terms of their placement defensively against the run. So you have this really interesting dynamic of weakness versus weakness on both sides. How is that going to give? But I think the big one here is going to be Drake Lindsey and whether or not he's going to play better than what he has in recent form. Last 2 weeks have been a steep drop-off in play. If you look at the last 2 weeks for him, 4.6 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 2 turnover-worthy plays as well. And this has just not been an explosive passing team. But I do balk at the thought of Nebraska, a group that has been a little disappointing from an ATS standpoint, laying such a big number on the road in conference play. We're talking about a full touchdown here. Obviously, you have to win by 8 or more points if you're laying this number. I don't know if I'd be surprised if we get like a 6.5 juice to the dog side or whatever it is. But asking Nebraska to do this, I think, is it's something that I think gives you pause at this point right now. I don't think Minnesota is that bad of a team that they wouldn't be able to stay inside of a touchdown at home in a conference game. And I do think it's worth mentioning, at least in the 3 Big Ten games that Raiola has played at this point, we've also seen a little bit of a statistical regression for Raiola for the most part. Really, the big one is the uptick in turnover-worthy plays for Raiola. We've seen his turnover-worthy play rate rise to just about 5% in the games that he's played in conference. That is something to monitor here as you, again, have to go on the road on a short week to take on Minnesota for Raiola. So as we look at it now, didn't have a play here, but looking at 7 seems pretty tempting to go in that direction. Let's hit the Mountain West. San Jose State taking on Utah State. For those who don't care about the conference, doesn't mean much, but for those who are betting college football and really following almost every single one of these games, really interesting betting game. Utah State has been one of the best cover teams in the country. They're 5-1 against the spread heading into this game. Now, you see this thing, opens up 5 with a total of 64. Initially gets bet down to 3.5, but we're starting to get that buyback once again. 4 at Circa with a total of 61.5, as well as the numbers that you're seeing here. This is going to be a really fun game to watch. San Jose State, from an offensive standpoint, they can't run the ball. They're 115th in the country in terms of their efficiency running the ball. If you look at their late down success rate, they've been very, very good against a defense that has been pretty average in that regard, defending it. That would be Utah State. So can San Jose State continue its success on 3rd and 4th downs when they get to those downs? Can Utah State, in terms of their defense, stop this passing attack? This has been the strength of Utah State's defense to this point. 65th in the country against the pass from an EPA perspective. So that's going to work against a San Jose State spread and shred that has been the backbone of their offense at this point right now. And a similar vibe to what we just talked about with Nebraska and Minnesota, in that while San Jose State cannot run the ball, they take on a defense that, from an efficiency standpoint, has had trouble stopping the run. So that is going to be an interesting dynamic. But on the flip side, Utah State's offense has been great. Their rush offense has been fantastic. It's actually top 40 unit in the country, taking on a group in San Jose State that has been having a lot of trouble stopping the run. Their pass defense has been horrible. We saw Stanford move up and down the field in a loss on the road for the Spartans. I'm really tempted, just like we talk about all the time, buy low and sell high. And it seemed like you were at a high last week when Utah State was a road favorite against Hawaii, and then they went and got their doors blown off. Feels like we might be in that territory once again. However, somebody who was not really big on San Jose State coming into this game, not really a fan of what we're going to look at here. And finally, the narratives, everything that we're going to get tonight, I cannot wait to see what is going to transpire. North Carolina on the road against Cal. We saw this open 11.5 with a total of 47. Stormy and I, a little head-to-head on our thoughts here. Market, I think her buy point, as we talked about the other day, I believe was 9.5. Well, if she wants 8.5, you got it. Total of 46.5 for Cal. Some really steady movement toward UNC. Despite the fact that we had the hot mic report today from Pablo Torre. I don't know if you saw what was going on here. UNC quarterback Gio Lopez, should note, is expected to return from injury. So that's probably part of the injury news here. What is there to say at this point right now for North Carolina? Offense has been one of the worst in the country. Defense has been one of the worst in the country, except for against the run. They've played it relatively well, but when your secondary is so bad, why would you try to test this front seven? And for Cal, as we saw, the one time at least in the big favorite role against a like opponent, if you will, they go out to Snapdragon Stadium and they get smoked in a weird game against the Aztecs. It's a big ask for Cal. And I again, even at 8.5, to me, it would be North Carolina or nothing, just given where this number is at and what we know about this Cal team so far. It's not like they've been blowing away market expectations at this point. They're only 3-3 against the spread. Would very much be looking forward and looking toward North Carolina tonight. Let's see, but Bruce Marshall thinks. Got a list of games that Bruce is going to discuss with us on the other side. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll talk with Tom Byrne, and then we'll head you off into the weekend as we get ready for baseball, too, coming up at 30. Don't go anywhere. It's Money Moves.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Got a little bit of breaking news in the National Football League. Not breaking in terms of it being shocking. I think we were heading in this direction, but it is officially official for those who are wondering what was going to happen at quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings. Carson Wentz will officially start. J.J. McCarthy is going to serve as the number 3 quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings this weekend against the Philadelphia Eagles. So something that was heading in that direction. McCarthy had returned to practice, but had been limited all week. So Minnesota is going to roll with Carson Wentz one more time. Current numbers for Minnesota at home against the Philadelphia Eagles. Market's still sitting the Eagles as a short road favorite, 2.5 at a couple of spots, but 2 the predominant number with a total of 44. A really hard spot to be in, I think, from a measurement standpoint for these two teams. We had talked about the market ratings, where the market had put both of these squads. And Philadelphia was kind of the story, with them being downgraded to this point, the lowest point for their market rating of the season. And rightfully so. They've lost 2 straight. They've failed to cover the last 2 games as well. And Minnesota, it's interesting, where this team has been and what the expectation was for them at the beginning of the year, even with J.J. McCarthy out there. Remember the dramatic difference between J.J. McCarthy and Carson Wentz, or at least the belief that there wasn't going to be a difference. And at this point right now, it has not come to fruition, and McCarthy's going to miss one more game here. I think if you're making an argument, as we talked about with Will, if you're buying into what Brian Flores and this defense is selling, as we usually can, then you're looking at Minnesota maybe being alive. And I think really what the option could be for you here, as we're looking at a pretty low total, 43.5. Obviously, you can tease that up if you're somewhere where you can find a spot where teasers are palatable still from a pricing standpoint. Get them up to 8. And there's a lot of good teaser options for you. I think one of the ones that had stuck out to me that I discussed with Will on his podcast, and one we have already in the bank. It is hard for me to see a scenario, and thus famous last words, it will happen. But it's hard for me to see a scenario in which Indianapolis doesn't stay inside 7.5 against the Los Angeles Chargers. Again, if you're looking for another teaser leg to pair with the Minnesota Vikings, I can understand if you think that the Los Angeles Chargers are in a position against the Colts team whose secondary has not been particularly great and is getting thinner by the day, that they're going to be in position to potentially win this game. Now, we should note that we still have these offensive line issues for the Los Angeles Chargers. Joe Alt was a limited participant in practice last time out. We're still waiting to see what the other tackle spot looks like. But if you're once again down a couple of starters, then I think you're in a position where the Colts maybe still are being a little underrated. And then there's the aspect of home field and how you rate home field in the National Football League and how you rate with the Los Angeles Chargers, what they do with them at home field. I've talked to some handicappers that would tell you that you don't really give them anything for home field. And if you roll with that theory, then the Chargers are better than the Indianapolis Colts by that theory. If you're looking at this number, it's not something I can get down with. But from a situational standpoint, we've started to see the mask slip a little bit for Indy over the last couple of weeks. And you do wonder, after Daniel Jones showed his old ways in at least one play against the Arizona Cardinals, if that is going to be the case. And it starts to open the door for a couple of different things for the Indianapolis Colts and by extension the AFC South. I know that there are some that are kind of positing that maybe, just maybe, it's going to be time to buy in on the Houston Texans to win the AFC South. Some still belief that Houston can still win this division. It's not something I agree with in any way, shape, or form. I think this Texans offense has been gross, and I think it's going to continue to be the biggest problem for Houston. I think there's a congratulations in order for the Texans for taking advantage of the schedule and the way that it is broken down for them over the last couple of weeks. But spare me if I don't believe that wins over the Titans and the beleaguered Ravens are things that we should write home about as a sign of improvement for Houston, where the reality is you took on the worst team in the National Football League and a team that is beleaguered with injury that you got to take it to. We'll see how you respond coming up on Monday, on the road against the Seattle Seahawks. By the way, kudos to the NFL for that. Another true doubleheader where we get a kickoff at 7 p.m. Pacific time. Absolutely cannot wait for that matchup on Monday Night Football. It's a big test for them. And it's a big test for Seattle, who, of course, is kind of flirting with the idea of being a contender, not only in its own division, but in a wide-open conference for the most part, and in an open NFL, where for the first time this season we're seeing the Kansas City Chiefs, from a market standpoint, finally solidifying its spot at the top of the power ratings in the National Football League. All right, let's go through a couple of news and notes as well as they're kind of trickling out here in the National Football League and what we're waiting for in terms of news, injury notes, things like this. We do have a couple of injury news coming out of college football as well. For example, LSU linebacker Whit Weeks plans to warm up, attempt to play against Vanderbilt this coming weekend for LSU. We talked about this a little bit earlier with Will Hill in terms of LSU's matchup this coming weekend against Vandy. One of those interesting scenarios, too, as I take a diversion really quickly, in that this Vandy team never really favored in these spots, and it seems like a too good to be true. What are we seeing here? We should note, though, for today, that this has been moving in that direction. So let's stick with the theme of college football and welcome in Bruce Marshall, who is with us here. Bruce, it is good to talk to you. I haven't talked to you for a while. Hope you've been doing well, sir. I wanted to start with a couple of interesting games you have on your list. Stormy Buonantony's not here today because she will be on the sideline for Texas, Kentucky. So I'd like to ask you, what does Stormy have in store for her coming up on Saturday?
Well, first thing about Kentucky is here, what I'm hearing, Mark Stoops is in heavy trouble there, but if he goes out the door, he's going to go out kicking and screaming. He has that big buyout, thanks to Jimmy Sexton getting him a heck of a deal that I believe is like $38 million and payable all, no offsets, no nothing else. Sort of the way Gus Malzahn got paid off, Chad Morris at Arkansas, other guys from Sexton's stable. This is not a good situation at Kentucky. I'm not sure if Calzada's even going to be back in the lineup tomorrow. They've been going with Cutter Boley the last month at quarterback. I don't think either one makes a difference. Boley is not an SEC quarterback. This is the worst offense in the SEC. They haven't won an SEC game in more than a year. That's why Stoops is going to lose his job. They have fallen behind the rest of the SEC offensively. I would normally be a little bit leery about Texas. I had been all season until last week, and then maybe a possible flat spot after Oklahoma. But I instead think because Texas started sort of slow, I can see them gaining momentum the second half of the season. Arch is making some progress. He's not quite where we thought he was going to be, but that wasn't too bad last week. And I just don't think Kentucky's going to do anything here. This thing looks like 31-7 to me. I think Texas might start getting it rolling. And this is a bad situation at Kentucky and ain't going to get any better the rest of the season.
When you say starting to get it rolling, they still only have 2 losses. Would you think they could roll to the point where they find themselves in playoff contention still, Texas?
Yeah, they could. I mean, they only got 1 SEC loss. And I don't know who's going to go through this thing unbeaten. Maybe Alabama will. I don't think Ole Miss will after tomorrow probably. So, if they can stick on 1 loss and not lose again, they got a good chance to get in the SEC title game. At 2 losses, if they can keep winning by the time we get to early December, they'd probably be in the at-large mix. But, no, I don't think Texas is out of this at all yet, and especially since I think they haven't been playing at full capacity. But the first time we kind of saw that was last week. And you see teams making a move the second half of the season every single year. This might be a year Texas puts it together the second half of the year. But bigger attraction tomorrow is I just go against Kentucky right now. Let's make the Cats prove they can score some points before we consider taking them.
For audience, the ranked opponents left, the currently ranked opponents left on Texas schedule, Vandy, Georgia, which is a road game, and then Texas A&M. Bruce Marshall with us as we look ahead to the college football slate. Let's talk about one of the better trophies, in my opinion, the Jewel Shillelagh, USC and Notre Dame. I think this is one of those where I look at it, Bruce, and I go, what am I missing? I feel like USC is getting a little disrespected here, catching 9.5. I understand there's some weather, but what am I looking at?
Well, maybe you're right. I mean, this is the old Notre Dame factor coming in. But by the way, enjoy this series while we can. I don't know that it goes on beyond next year. They don't have a contract beyond 26. I'm not even sure about the 26 game. I think this thing is going to be ending, and there are no USC fans who are happy about that, whatever the administration wants to say. This is a very unpopular move on the SC side if it actually comes to pass. Now, they have not won at South Bend since 2011. They looked good against Michigan last week, but in retrospect, I think I missed on that game, and all of us who liked Michigan. The Wolverines just aren't that potent right now. Notre Dame is potent, and C.J. Carr has come a long way in half a season. He's getting some peripheral Heisman mention now. I can't believe how mature he has looked the last month. And even those 2 losses Notre Dame had, you've got 2 teams in the top 5 that beat them, and basically last plays of the game, a jump ball in the end zone, Texas A&M on a 4th down with 13 seconds left, and that last-second field goal at Miami. This is a team that should be a playoff team. The defense is playing better. I still don't think USC's defense is all that great. Michigan's got limitations. Notre Dame's a lot better than Michigan, and I think this team's going to make the playoff, and they will do it tomorrow. The rain. It's a chance of rain tomorrow. They're talking about 30% or so it may not be that bad. They've got a new field turf there at South Bend. I don't think that's going to impact things too much. So I think it's going to be an over as well. Notre Dame, for me, stronger vote on the over tomorrow. In South Bend, enjoy this series while we can. It might be going away.
Yep, Pro Sports Better, Sportsline.com. Bruce, we appreciate a couple minutes. I know we have some technical issues to get you here, but thanks for a couple, man. Appreciate it.
Okay, take care, guys.
Yep, quick and simple. Bruce Marshall here with us. The USC Notre Dame one, I'm glad we talked to Bruce about that because that seems like one of those low-hanging, like Notre Dame, that's way too many points. But to the point of not believing in a defense or the other, Notre Dame has turned things around, but the question still remains, is that because of the opponents they faced or because they're actually getting a little bit better? Let's take our break. On the other side, Tom Burns going to be with us, SiriusXM host. We know what we talk about with Tom. I know he bets every single sport, but I got to find out if he's got some NBA win totals for us coming up this year.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
All right, football be damned. We've got a lot to get to here in the next couple of minutes. We got the NBA season on the horizon, and there is no better person to get ready for the association with than one Tom Byrne, who joins us now, SiriusXM host. I join him on Friday nights. Maybe I'll be talking to him in a few hours here. That's like 9. That's not a few. Tom, it's good to talk to you, buddy. He joins us on the Progressive Guest Line. I want to start with the NBA. Give it to me. Give me your hottest NBA win total, the one that if somebody asks you, I've been getting harassed by professional bettor Paul Bovey, so give me a win total. Who are you going to give out if given that question?
Well, you might not be prepared for these. And I think anybody who handicaps the NBA on a yearly basis understands where I'm heading. When you do this by looking at numbers, and let's say, for example, you use predictive metrics, predictive LeBron, Darko, predictive EPN, whatever they might be, use a, well-respected minutes projection. I'll use Kevin Pelton's, from ESPN.com and their analytic team. When you do that and you punch in the numbers, you're going to find some ugly sides, right? So, perfect example, Brooklyn. Why? Because they're 19.5. Another great example, Utah. Why? Because they're 18.5, right? So, naturally, you got to hold your nose, and you're going to say, I don't want to do this. And you do have to concern yourself with a tank job. But more times than not, I don't know what the exact, I don't know if it's 54%, 55%, I could kind of dig into it. But more times than not, you're going to have to stomach those sort of bets, so you're going to find some value. Conversely, on the other side, I would give you some surprising ones as well. Everybody loves the Knicks this year. East Coast basketball, not great. How about under? How about under 53.5? I think they win 46, 47 games. That's what I got them penciled into. I could argue maybe we're getting a little ahead of ourselves with Detroit. Young team on the come up, okay, but 45.5, I might be interested. Denver, good trade. Cam Johnson, I get that. But I could be convinced going under 53.5. Houston, under 52.5. And I do think Fred VanVleet, losing him, JVT, is a bigger deal than most people know. He could space the floor for them. He's a very good ball handler. He's a very good three-point shooter. His gravity, I think they're going to miss him. Even Orlando, now I haven't fired on that, but under 51.5. is a little spicy to me. So, I get that you're not going to like some of these plays, especially having to go over on Utah and Brooklyn, but I do think that's where the value is.
Well, you're talking to somebody who, number one on the board with the bullet. I will be sweating out Hornets games every day because I think the Charlotte Hornets are an over candidate by my measure. Yeah, and I think there's a lot there, especially if we'll see if LaMelo can be healthy. That has been something that he has not been achieving yet. Really quickly, you've talked about a couple of teams there. The two I wanted to ask about, but first off, Orlando. I can't come around on this team being that much better offensively. I understand that Desmond Bane is going to help them from a shooting standpoint, but to your point about betting this team under its total, that to me is something that makes so much sense because I don't know if they're going to be a good offensive team still.
No, me neither. They're a very solid squad when you consider the defensive side where they could be exquisite. Jonathan Isaac is always good to miss about 40 games, but Isaac is still, with his length and agility, very good on that end. I mean, they legitimately have probably upwards of 7 guys who are top 100 players in the NBA now. None of them are legit top 10 guys. They might not even be top 15 guys. But Wagner, Banchero, Bane, Suggs, they've got guys who can play, guys who are underrated. Batazzi, the big guys, underrated. Isaac, when he plays, underrated. I mean, these guys are talented, man. So from that standpoint, I like them. But to your point, offensively, there are going to be a lot of nights where you look and in the fourth quarter, there's 3 minutes left and they're stuck on 85 points.
Yep.
Who are you going to go to when you need that big bucket remains an issue? I do think Desmond Bane, they might have overpaid for him. But I do like the fit because at least they have somebody now who's a threat from 3. Now, how much better offensively? We could debate that. They're not going to be a great offensive team. I agree with you there. But I do like the fit. They needed Bane. I almost understand why they overpaid in the way they did because they were so desperate, to your point, to add some shooting.
Tom Burns, SiriusXM, Mad Dog Radio, host of Mad Dog Sports Radio tonight, point after as well. And on here, occasionally, on the Vegas Stats and Information Network. All right, let's head to the National Football League. As you look at the card for this coming weekend, what sticks in your craw? What's at the top of the list?
Well, here's another one you're going to have to prepare yourself for. Give me the Titans +7. I'll take the Tennessee Titans and just hope they come out with a little bit more fight, a little bit more desire. I think they will. They've been humiliated of late. Cam Ward, in theory, JVT, should be starting to settle in a little bit as we move it along. Maybe have that little bit of the, interim coach bump. But I also think that the Pats need to prove to me that they're so good that they should be laying a touchdown on the road. I know they're a trendy pick. I might be wrong about Drake May. I'm coming around to the idea that I might have gotten the May situation I might have been misguided. Let's put it that way, man, because this dude, I don't know if I want to call him young Josh Allen, but he has been incredible of late. But are we sure they're good enough to be a 7-point favorite on the road? If there's a team that maybe they would be. It's Tennessee. I'll take my chances. Give me Tennessee plus the 7 this week.
Yep, I think it makes a ton of sense. I think it's definitely worth looking at here. Let me ask you about your neck of the woods, Philadelphia and the Eagles. So we do our market power ratings every single week, and this Eagles team has been downgraded by the betting market. Is it too far? Is it too short on the road against the Minnesota Vikings? We did get official word a couple of minutes ago. It is Carson Wentz once more.
Yeah, former Eagle, which is interesting. We all know the backdrop there. 2017 would have been the MVP through 13 games, if not for injury, all downhill of late. Listen, he's a consummate professional, but he's just not a high-level quarterback. The Eagles got to prove themselves in this game. Listen, I was of the mindset that through 4 games, despite being outgained in all of them, they were 4-0. They looked to be on their way to 5-0 as they're up 2 scores against Denver. Since then, it's been an abomination. The bottom line to me is they got to get back to who they are. They're a physical football team, running behind when it's healthy, the best line in football with Saquon. And then when they got to put the extra man in the box, that's when you beat them over the top with an A.J. Brown, with the Devonta Smith. Right now, Kevin Patullo, the new OC, JVT, has done an awful job. He's too concerned about the mouths he has to feed. He's too concerned about A.J. Brown, who's always bitching and moaning. He's too concerned even about Devonta Smith. Go back to who they are and be physical and run it down their throats. And I think they'll do that. I think Hurts will find a little bit more consistency. Listen, this team got booed off the field last year against Cleveland. What a Super Bowl. It's too early to panic. I didn't lay the points, and I missed the best of the number now, so I might lay off. But my life on the line, there's not much of the decision. You got to lay up to 2.5 with the Eagles on the road here in a get-right spot.
Tom Byrne with us at 1. Tom Byrne up on X. You look at the standings in the AFC, Tom, and it does look like the 2008 standings in the NFL, and especially in the AFC. We have the Chargers, the Colts, the Patriots, and, of course, the Steelers at the top of their respective divisions. Let's talk about this Colts-Chargers game. When I was a youth and a big Colts fan, I hated the Chargers. Chargers knocked this team out a ton of times in the postseason. Phillip Rivers was a thorn in the paw of Peyton Manning as well. Chargers are a 1.5-point favorite over Indy with a total of 48.5. What am I missing here? Market telling me this Chargers team might be better than Indianapolis?
Yeah, listen, I think a lot of people are surprised by that because Indy obviously has been such a huge story. Chargers got off to a pretty good start. So I do understand that. I have a hard time trusting Herbert in the postseason spot, but, last I checked, it's still a regular season game. It's in L.A. Now, we could argue maybe that's not a typical home advantage where right now, and I don't know what you're handicapping to that, but right now I got it at 2.35 home. Last 16 weeks, home field has been worth 2.97 points. Now, last 5 seasons, it's closer to 2.1. So I'm somewhere in the middle of that, but I don't know that the Chargers' home field is quite that. This Colts team offensively is great. I like that they got pressure on 47% of the dropbacks of the opposition's quarterback last week. I still need to see a little bit more from this Colts team. You're Mr. Colt, though, so I'm not surprised. You also, aren't you a Charger fan? So you're in a tough spot in this game.
Whoa, no, never. Don't put that evil on
Now,
me.
you're not a Charger fan? I thought you were a Clippers and Anaheim Angels. I guess I assumed. Okay.
No. Colts are the outlier, and then it's all – I root for winning franchises like the Angels and the Clippers, okay? I'm not going to put this team –
the Angels, right.
That's right. All right, hey, before we get out of here, 90 seconds, give me the lowdown. You've been adding it to your repertoire here. You got anything good for me in hockey tonight?
Oh, God, no, I'm staying away. I told JVT during the break, here I am, the analytical geek, looking at all the numbers, expected goals against, player lineups and everything else, running it through Poisson distribution, and all I do is I pick every game, whether somebody that loses, I stay off the ones, they win. I want to put my head through a wall. I look at Money Puck. Every time I lose, my team had a 67% chance of winning it if you look at the deserve to win meter. I tell you, these hockey bettors, I don't know how they do it. They think we're nuts, JVT, and we are with the NBA and all the injuries. But the grind of a hockey season, it's like a week and a half in, and I'm thinking about calling it.
Yeah. The other day, this I think is the greatest example, when the Rangers, not when they played Toronto, but when they were at home against Edmonton, they lose 2-0. High danger chances in favor of New York, like 10-3. They dominated shot share. They lose 2-0. I could not do it on a day-to-day basis in hockey. Tom, good to talk to you, man. Thank you very much for the time today.
All right, JVT, appreciate you.
Yeah, you got it. At the number 1, Tom Byrne, up on X. And look, it's why we say it on the show all the time. Stormy doesn't really like it that much. And every sport has its aspects. But hockey is a stupid sport at times. And I mean that in a loving sense. But those kind of things will drive you nuts. We have all these things about bullpens and everything in baseball. Hockey, I think, would drive you crazy on a day-to-day basis. We'll come back, look ahead to the weekend, get some best bets, our look at the NLCS, the ALCS, and more before we head off here on Money Moves.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Couple of minutes before we hand it off to the boys on Follow the Money. If you missed out on any part of the program today and you want to check it out, you go to VSiN.com or wherever you get your podcast. Follow Money Moves and get everything you missed out on. Great show today. Big thanks to Bruce Marshall, Tom Byrne, Will Hill, Mike Palm, all who joined us here today. Again, make sure you hit rewind and go back and check out everything we have to offer. While you're there, if you wanted to like, rate, review, and subscribe a certain little podcast called Pod to the Future with myself and Mitchell Moss, that would be fantastic. You can check that out wherever you get your podcasts as well. Before we get to some of the best bets and looking ahead to the weekend, we have 2 games today in Major League Baseball that we should preview and get ready for. Starting the American League Championship Series, heartbreaker here, as my beloved Seattle Mariners are now, I don't want to say on life support. I don't want to be that pessimistic, but it's hard not to. It's funny how the emotions swing. Up 2-0, everything's great. Seattle Mariners, we're looking forward to potentially moving on here. Yeah, I said we. And then they lose 2 straight, get bombed out at home. Now we have 1 more left in Seattle before they have to head back to the Great North. So we will see if they can pull this off, and we will see if whether or not Bryce Miller can do it again. If you remember, Game 2 in Toronto, absolutely brilliant. Game 1 in Toronto, absolutely brilliant. Goes out there, gives them 6 innings of 2-hit baseball, only gives up 1 earned run, courtesy of a solo shot, strikes out 3, walks 3, gets pretty lucky for the most part when you look at batting average on balls in play. Now he gets to start again here today. He will oppose one Kevin Gausman, who's going to get the start for the Toronto Blue Jays. This is going to be an incredible look, and I cannot wait to see how this Mariners team bounces back. On the season, Miller has not been great. 5.68 ERA, 5.17 fielding independent. If you look at his 2 starts in the postseason, well, there's probably some room for a little bit of regression back to the guy that he was. 10 1/3 innings pitched, 2.61 ERA over those 10 1/3. Obviously, that includes the 6 innings he pitched that I mentioned in Game 1 against Toronto. A 4.30 fielding independent, 5.13 expected fielding independent. Strikeout rate really low over the span of the 2 outings that we've seen here, just 12.8%. He's never been a dominant strikeout guy anyway, so it's not like you're really coming out and expecting that. But the Mariners are in a tough spot because it does look like, Miller, I don't think you can ask him to do it again. Now, crazier things have happened. Short sample size dominance can continue. But you look at the way this sets up, there's 2 things here that you would probably point to potentially happening here. First off, it's that I just don't know if Miller's going to be able to pull this off, and thus the expectation, right? Ready yourself for disappointment, then you'll never be disappointed. I do think that there's probably a shorter stint for Miller today, only because of 2 things. First off, it's a 2-2 game. You don't want to go down 3-2 going back on the road to your opponent's building. The other that I think that is going to be in play is that Brian Wu is allegedly available coming out of the bullpen today for the Seattle Mariners. So that is going to be big. If you've got a guy like Wu that is potentially available for you, and you could throw Miller out there. If you see the signs, if he gives up an early run, you pull it quick, and then you go there. Miller's outs today are sitting at 11.5, shaded to the under at minus 143. Gives you a really good indicator of how this is going to look. As for Gausman, leash is probably a little bit longer, 15.5, over minus 122 on the total outs for him today. Going to be curious to see where the market gets to for Miller in terms of his total outs and if we're going to continue to drop in that direction. I still think, minus 143 is appropriately priced, 11.5, but still think you can make a case to even go under there for Miller because, again, if he looks like any form, if you get some walks in there, some contact, I wouldn't be surprised if he's going to be done in like the second inning, given what you know about Kevin Wu and the potential there. For Gausman, as we have seen throughout this regular season, he's been pretty steady as we have seen him. 3.59 ERA, 3.41 fielding independent. What you see is what you get with him, and I think that the Toronto Blue Jays, rightfully so, market has a lot of belief in them, and they seem to be the team, and as Mike said it too when Mike palmed with us earlier, seem to be well on their way to potentially getting this done. We have seen him, Gausman, 2 times in this postseason, 5 2/3 each time, just 3 earned runs in totality with about 8 strikeouts over the course of those outings. That was, of course, against the New York Yankees and in that matchup in Game 1 against the Seattle Mariners. So can he at least come out and give them an opportunity? Had actually pitched well against Seattle in that game. Of course, as we know, big difference, Cal Raleigh getting a homer in the 6th inning, all coming late, Seattle's offense against the Toronto Blue Jays in Game 1. I'm pulling for it. I'm hoping it. I go back to, again, the market really did come in strong on Toronto and clearly believes they're the better team. Obviously, with Miller on the hill, you're seeing this Toronto Blue Jays team as a $1.15 favorite. But we did see initially some spots, this was a little bit shorter. I had like minus 105 on some of the opens and some of the notes there for Toronto. Now, the NLCS, a completely different story. Yesterday, we were speculating whether or not it was going to be Jose Quintana to get the start. That was not the case. It is indeed going to be Jose Quintana tonight for the Milwaukee Brewers. They oppose one Shohei Ohtani. If you look at it for Quintana's standpoint here, what you see is what we've talked about a lot with this team. But pitching be damned, I don't really care too much, excuse me, about this team's pitching for the most part. It's about whether or not this hitting is going to show up for the Milwaukee Brewers. Massive underdogs tonight against Shohei Ohtani. 206 the price tag here for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Hard not to see this team ending this today and moving on against the Milwaukee Brewers in a potential sweep. Shout out to one Will Hill, who has a sweep ticket in his pocket for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Ohtani has not pitched since Saturday on the 4th, so we haven't seen him for a while. 6 innings pitched. That was that matchup against the Philadelphia Phillies. 3 earned runs, struck out 9, only walked 1. Command was really on. Given the way that this Brewers team has been hitting the ball, or the lack thereof, it is really hard to believe that the Milwaukee Brewers against Ohtani are going to start to wake up here and move forward. And when it comes to Quintana, as we've talked about, you do have some noise in some of these numbers. The differential in the regular season in terms of ERA and fielding independent. There's a guy here that pitches to contact, so that's going to be part of it. And you do wonder what this looks like from a bullpen standpoint if Quintana gets chased early for the Milwaukee Brewers. But it's hard to look at this and make a very strong case for Quintana to come out and dominate. He did give them 3 innings, the Brewers, of course, against the Cubs in the postseason, and that's really all we've seen from Milwaukee and Quintana. Can't expect against this lineup that he's going to be able to get out there and get this done. So looks like we're staring to potentially Toronto and Seattle. And then as you look at it, too, from the MVP standpoint for both series, I think both are going to be really interesting as you look at the performers for these games. The last 2 for the Toronto Blue Jays, you've really seen this offense wake up for ALCS MVP, but it's hard not to look at Vlad Guerrero, especially after his Game 3 performance. He is the plus 320 favorite to do so, just ahead of Jorge Polanco. But again, going back to Game 3 for Vlad, 4 hits, 4 at-bats, scores 3 times with the homer. He is really the impetus behind this and what they have been able to do in that one big win here. And then, of course, as you look at it last night as well for Vlad Guerrero, 2 of 5, goes deep again. The dude is the deserving favorite for a team that is favored to do so. If you like Toronto to win this thing tonight and go back home 3-2, hard not to throw a little bit down on Vlad Guerrero at plus 320. And for the National League Championship Series, how you're going to grade this and what you're going to look at for this award, man, there are so many different options for you here. Freddie Freeman at plus 420. Look at the way this market is priced. Freddie Freeman at plus 420. Tommy Edman plus 450. Snell 5-1. Ohtani is going to be an interesting one. That plus 550, if he comes out, shuts them out today, as well as gives them something offensively, like a game-winning homer or something like that, Ohtani at plus 550 might be something worth looking at if they're going to end this thing in a sweep. But the way this market is priced is absolutely incredible. Can you give me a Brewer anywhere on here? It does not look good for Milwaukee. All right. let's head to best bets and look ahead to the weekend that will be a short card, at least in terms of the best bets that are plugged in here. Do have a couple of add last minute. I apologize to Justin, our producer, because I did not send these in, and I probably should have, and I apologize for that. But the one that we have discussed here that is on the card right now, we have this teaser in the National Football League with the Indianapolis Colts and the Falcons. Lost last night with Darnell Washington on over 12.5 longest reception. It's always one of those things where, what you bet and how you discuss it. We talked about the explosive rate allowed for the Cincinnati Bengals and the potential for some of these guys to either go over their longest reception or for Aaron Rodgers to go over longest completion. Completion turned out the way to go. It could have gone over. It actually went over his longest completion twice in the loss to Cincinnati yesterday. So let's talk about a couple of games for this coming weekend that'll be on the card in the National Football League. Again, teaser for the Indianapolis Colts and the Atlanta Falcons. Colts up to 7.5, Falcons up to 8.5 on the teaser leg there. Also, added on the card for me this coming weekend in the National Football League. As you look across the board, it is hard, I think, to turn this down, and I'm with Tom Byrne on it. Tennessee Titans, we'll try this one more time. We asked bad teams to do good things for you, and if you look at that, catching 7 at home against New England, understand how everything is looked for Tennessee, how it's looked for the New England Patriots, but Titans are on the card for me there as you look at this weekend coming up, as well as Jacksonville catching 3 against the Los Angeles Rams at Wembley. Haven't talked a ton about this one. We know that Nakua is injured here for the Los Angeles Rams. Jacksonville catching a full 3 on a neutral against L.A. Believe in this Jacksonville team. It's the reason why I bet them to win the AFC South. I think they're a very good team. Liam Cohen's turned this thing around to an extent. I think they're going to be able to get after a defense that from a secondary standpoint and really from a second-level standpoint has had trouble defending the pass. So give me the Jacksonville Jaguars +3. We'll have some more on these coming up on Sunday as part of our countdown to kickoff and live bet Sunday when Stormy comes back. Follow the money. Coming up next for the next 3 hours, Mitch and Paul will be with you. And then remember, it is a Friday, so the Circa Friday Football Invitational kicks off 7 p.m., another week of that. And then the SGP boys, man, what a run for those first touchdowns. Check out those guys coming up at 10 p.m. Eastern. Talk to you again on Monday here on Money Move.